Once again, we'd like to thank you for the comments that you have sent in our last episode of the program, and we really do appreciate them. Today, we're looking at something that matters to you, and we'll start out with a question to you. When you hear about power in Nigeria, what comes to mind? I know for the elderly here, you'll be thinking NEPA, PHCN, and then some of us who are watching may never have heard of NEPA. All you heard is PHCN, and now you have the different distribution companies. But power is one topic that every Nigerian talks about because it affects everything, from the industries to the artisan on the roadside who's looking at how to charge his mobile phone. Power has been of concern to everybody, and this administration has harped on the fact that power needs to remain a priority if Nigeria is to industrialize to the point where the economy is affected positively. How much has been invested in the power sector? We continue to hear of a figure, $16 billion, that was invested in the power sector just about the time that democracy came back into the Nigerian space. Has that investment paid off? What about the additional investments that have come after the Obasanjo administration, the Yar'Adua administration, the Goodluck Jonathan administration, the Buhari administration, and now this administration? What will change? How would power be transformed to positive impact on Nigerians? These are some of the questions we asked our guest on Newsnight. Newsnight sat down for a conversation with Nigeria's Minister of Power, who talks to us about analyzing the problems and putting out a solution that will be implementable, that will change the power sector. Honourable Minister, thank you for speaking with us on Newsnight.
Good afternoon.
One would say we've been looking and longing for this opportunity to sit with you and get to find out what it is, because as we all know, power is a major ingredient in any economy, and the Nigerian power system has been a major concern for everybody, from even the child screaming NEPA when people don't know that NEPA is no longer in existence, but NEPA you still hear the shout of NEPA, and it's nostalgic. But tell us, what has it been like for you, seeing that you're not exactly an engineer? Yes, you've been engineering money. Now you're here. So talk to us about your journey so far in the power sector.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm actually delighted to talk about my ministry and the sector here tonight. My name is Bayo Adelambu, the Minister of Power for the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Just like you have succinctly put it, power is key to economic growth. If you want to achieve any significant social development, just like every other advanced country in the world, they prioritize power, energy first, and they became industrialized nations. Today, in Nigeria, if we truly want to have major growth in our economy and also develop industrially, we must prioritize power. And Mr. President, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, did not miss word in his opening speech for the new year, where he actually prioritized power as a major driver to achieve the renewed hope agenda of this administration. So power is top priority. And we also know that it is one of the most sensitive ministries that we have in government, this administration, because it touches on everybody. It affects every household. It affects every business outfit. It affects every industry. When light is out, everybody knows about it. When it's up, everybody knows about it. So even to the little child, also know that power is so important to our daily existence. You mentioned the fact that I'm not an engineer. So what am I doing in power? Let me tell you, the little I've seen in the power sector today, it is a thing of fact that our problem in the power sector is not engineering problem. It's not a technical problem. We've had engineers in the past as power ministers, electrical engineers. What I have seen is that our problem goes beyond technical, because the technology we use in the power sector today is imported technology. And wherever we bring them, Western Europe, in the North America, or Fast East Asia, these are technology that has been tested, has been trusted. They only brought here, installed, and it is plug and play. Why is it working over there and it's not working here? So the problem is not really technology. The problem with the power sector is about providing solution to our liquidity problems in the sector, to our funding problems in the sector, to our operational problems and structural problems in the power sector. So the problems are threefold. It is liquidity and funding, it is structural, and it is operational. So, given my background, I believe I'm in the advantage position to understudy these problems and provide lasting and sustainable solution to the power sector. And what we have done in the past 4 months, in fact, let me say the first 3 months of our being inaugurated, was to do a comprehensive diagnosis of the sector.
Let me stop you here, because it looks like if I let you alone, the next 1 hour you just go on. You really,
it's okay.
You really looked
let's
into
take it
this.
one after the other.
So let's go one after the other. So you've come in, you've seen that the problem is not the technology. It's a plug and play technology that's working elsewhere. Our problem, you mentioned 3 things: liquidity,
yes,
funding,
yes.
Did you mention human capital?
Yes, I said operational and structural.
Operational and structural. That
Yes.
ties to human capital.
Yes.
Again, these are like 3 things that many will say Nigeria already, in quote, has.
Yes.
So why has it not been functional with these things that we already have? We do have money.
Yes.
I mean, we keep talking about $16 billion that was invested in the power sector when we came into democracy. One would think that after a while, everything will be sorted. We went into privatization, came out of privatization, went back again into partial privatization. And that's where we are right now. So the question of operationability comes to play. So let's go back a bit and start from that point. So we have these things. What's the issue?
Yes, let me take the issue of liquidity and funding, which is about the most important issue in the sector. Sincerely, if we are able to resolve this liquidity issue, power sector issues are solved 50%. In any business organization or business process, the business must be self-funding and it must pay back all the contributors in the value chain. There must be adequate liquidity injection into the power sector. Power may look abstract to a lot of people, but it is not different from our normal goods and services, whereby production is involved, transportation is involved, and delivery is involved. At every stage of this segment in the value chain, the production, which is the generation, there are costs incurred. For example, 75% of our power generated today is from thermal plants, and they use gas as raw materials. There will be cost of gas, there will be cost of running the organization, and there will be operational costs for generation. In transmission, there are also costs of wheeling the power onto the grid and of transporting it over the long distance to demand centers. There are also costs of distribution, which these discos incur to ensure that power is delivered into the household, into the business, and into the industry. All these costs, the only point at which these costs is recovered is the point of billing of the end consumer, which is the tariff that you charge for the production, transportation, and delivery of power. And this will also include the markup of these companies that are operating. In a full commercial operation, where the operators are allowed to operate with the forces in the market, the commercial charge will be the tariff. And once the consumer is able to pay, This is the tariff that will pay back every participant in the value chain.
But are the
generators, the transmitters, and the distributors.
Are the operators, have they not been allowed to function?
I'm coming.
Okay.
I'm just trying to make an analogy. If you allowed commercial tariff to be charged, this will pay back every participant in the value chain. But that means there will be enough liquidity. As power is being transmitted to the users, liquidity will be transmitted back to the value chain. But in a situation where we believe that we do not want to allow our people to pay the full commercial tariff on power consumed, and the government promised to subsidize, which is good, just for the benefit of the people. They don't want to increase the hardship. You've seen what people are already passing through. The inflation rate is high, the FX rate is going up, and people are really, really facing hard times. So deciding on tariff, on subsidy, is a good thing for the power sector. But this portion of the subsidy that government has promised must be promptly funded in order not to starve the value chain of the required liquidity. If, for example, commercial tariff is supposed to be 120 naira per kilowatt hour, and government has chosen to subsidize 50%, maybe 60 naira, and you say, okay, charge the consumers 60 naira. Once this 60 naira is collected, the distribution companies at the point of collections, probably their own portion of the 120 naira is 50 naira. They will remove it, leaving 10 naira to be returned to MBET, which is the middleman. The transmitters and the generators, they expect 70 naira. But it's only 10 naira that has been given to MBET, which means the government is owing MBET 60 naira. That 60 naira needs to be promptly and regularly funded if we must ensure continuity and sustainability of this sector. If we must ensure that the generators are able to pay the gas suppliers for production, if we must ensure that the TCN was able to maintain its network to ensure seamless transportation or transmission of power. But in a situation where this 60 naira is being owed, we are depriving the generators the money required to run their businesses, to pay for the raw materials, which is gas, to service their plants, to go on routine maintenance, to cover their overheads. I mean, there's a limit to which they can bear this. At a point in time, if this money is not paid, their activities will be grounded, which is why we are currently witnessing the shortage in gas supply by the suppliers to the generating companies. Because we are owing these generating companies so much that they cannot even afford to pay their gas suppliers.
Mr. Tinubu, this matter of debt being owed the transition companies and the generating companies, there are concerns also that government itself is not even paying, government agencies are not exactly paying for the power they consume. So the bulk of the debt being owed some of these gencos and the transition companies is coming from the government itself.
Yes, which is why I said we have a decision to make between funding the subsidy promptly and the government agencies paying their bills.
As they should.
Or if we don't do that, we allow the sector to operate commercially so that people pay the right price for power consumed. It is a difficult decision to make, but this sector must survive. If government is very sincere and serious about the subsidy, then it has to be funded. If you do not fund it, and we are not charging the cost-reflective tariff, then there will continue to be problem in the industry. There's no amount of technical expertise, experience, bring anybody from anywhere in the world to come and run the Ministry of Power. If the sector is deprived of the required liquidity, it will never operate effectively. which is why we must
make a
be
decision.
very determined in solving this problem. But the good news is we have passed the diagnosis stage. We know what the problem is with our power sector. Each of the segments in the value chain, they have their peculiar, unique problems, which we have fully documented, and even the solutions are already documented.
Okay,
so we're at the point of implementation of these solutions now.
We will get to that, but I was going to say, you're the government, so you'll be telling us what the decision is going forward. But before we get there, let's again pull back. We've looked at, okay, what the issue is. We've looked at what ought to be. But before we even get to that point where you tell us what the decision is of government is, let's look at the matter of privatization. I mean, I grew up knowing NEPA, and I'm sure you knew NEPA too. Then at one time we heard NEPA is gone. We now have PHCN.
Yes.
Now there's no PHCN. We have all manner of names, distribution companies all over the place.
TCN.
Then we have the GenCos. Then we have TCN, who's like the mother of them all, but Embed being the middleman. The concern amongst many is not just about the issue of liquidity or the matter of operationability. The concern is about the process of moving from the big-bodied PHCN or NEPA to these smaller companies. The privatization process. Some will say it's being flawed from the moment, from the get-go. And that's why these GenCos and DISCOs are complaining, because they were made to sign documents that they were not ready for. And some even came into the system unprepared. Is that the picture you meant on ground?
Thank you very much. Privatization of the sector started in 2013, precisely about 10, 11 years ago. I will say that the structure, the way and manner they unbundled the value chain was good for the sector. But the process of privatization itself, process of carrying out or executing the privatization process itself is what led to where we are today. So ordinarily, the value chain has three segments. You have the generation companies, you have generation, you have transmission, and you have distribution. I can tell you the uniqueness of the power ministry today. It's about the only one ministry that has the structure around it to be a mix of private and public ownership. Let me take the generation companies. It's a mix of public and private. We have the NDPHC, which is the Niger Delta Power Holding Company that is owned by government, which is now in the process of being sold. Then we have the private sector generation companies. When you look at transmission, it is 100% government. When you get to distribution, it is 100% private sector. So there is actually a misalignment in the structure. And once you have a control of the sector in the hands of the private sector, then the issue of regulation, the issue of monitoring, the issue of tracking come into play. How well are we able to regulate and monitor or track these private sector regulators to optimal performance is the major issue. They are profit entities. They are here to invest, make profit, not really as passionate as social service providers. Because a lot of them will see power or electricity as a commercial product. While those in government will see electricity as a social product.
Service to the people.
Service to the people. So this misalignment is what we need to sit down and deliberately control and decide how we want to treat electricity. Is it truly a commercial product or is it a social service to the people? If it's a commercial product, we believe that people must pay for power they consume commercially. If it's a social service, the issue of subsidy continues to feature. So I will not say the privatization is a success. it has not really achieved the intended objectives. As in, the private sector companies involved in this have not lived up to their billings.
Okay, so the process was good. So it is now those that came in that you're saying have not lived up to the expectations. Were the expectations from them too high? Is it possible?
No. It was just normal expectation of performance. Let me give you an example. Let's take the closest segment to the people in the value chain, which is distribution. But there's nothing you do within this sector if it does not translate into the consumer switching the lights, and the light comes up. They don't want to know about it. So the one that's most relevant to them is the distributors. Ordinarily, when you are privatizing your distribution segment, 3 things must be involved. The technical competence of the private company that will take it up. What is their experience in public utility management? What's their experience in delivering power to household businesses and industries? Number 2 is financial strength of these companies. Because a lot of investment is required. There's what we call the ATC and C losses. That's the aggregate technical, commercial, and the collection losses. That was established at the point of taking over the business. And the agreement was that over time, these losses are going to be reducing with an expected level of infrastructure investment. But have they invested? No. They have not invested in infrastructure as expected. So instead of losses going down, it's either it remains at the level at the time it took over, or it increases. So that will affect even the amount of liquidity they're able to collect into the sector through their billings. So it is actually the operators now that I believe are not performing optimally. Well, a lot of them are not experts in managing public utilities. They don't have the financial strength, and they're also not making the expected investment in improving the infrastructures they made on ground. So if all those factors are not there, how do you expect them to perform?
Some of them will argue
now,
that
the issue of regulation is so there should be penalties for you not meeting some of the certain targets and all that. How many of them do you really want to penalize? You've seen that even the regulator, that's NEC, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Company, has wielded big stick on 1 or 2 of these discourse. What has been the result? So we have identified this as a problem, and we have documented how this problem will be resolved going forward. Because I'm actually not enthusiastic talking about problems and issues all the time. I'm more concerned about solutions going forward.
Now, when we started this conversation, you told us about, you've done your analysis, you've looked through the system, you've seen where the issues are, and there are solutions which you have laid out. You've even mentioned some of them. But are we really ready for these solutions? Do we have the infrastructure needed? For instance, you mentioned earlier about the costs. You said cost at every point in the value chain. One of the costs you mentioned was gas.
Yes.
Again, before we went on that break, you talked about providing again certain infrastructure, like poles, conductors, transformers. All these things look like they require
funding.
And that's among the 3 things you mentioned.
Yes.
Funding. Where do we start?
If you're able to generate even just 6,000 consistently, we are currently generating 3,500, 4,000. And the current capacity can give us nothing less than between 6,000 and 8,000. Even the transmission capacity can will 6,000 today. The thermal plant can give us 2,000 megawatts comfortably. We have the Kanji, we have Jeba, we have Shiroro, we have Zungeru, we have Dakin Kowa, we have Kashimbila. Among all this, we can get 2,000. Then the thermal plants, we have the Niger Delta Power Holding Company, and the PHC. You can comfortably give us 1,500 megawatts today to 2,000. There is gas supply. And the private sector operate the Geregus, Omotosho, Olonshogo, Iovbo, Calabar, Azura, and all that. They can give us 2,000. That's like 4,000 coming from thermal plants and 2,000 from the hydro plant. That is 6,000. But the issue is there's shortage in gas supply. If we're able to resolve the issue of gas today, we will not have problems in generation.
Okay.
That is one of the problems
Okay.
that we have in generation. Then the next thing again is, because of the economics of power generation, it is desirable to actually generate bulk power in areas that have proximity to raw materials, which is gas. So you see, southeast, you have more of the gas plants in there, gas power plants. And within the middle belt, where you have water, which is more like the materials for hydropower plants. You see Kanji, Jeba, you see Zungeru, Shiroro, Kashimila, all within the middle belt. You understand? Niger State, Benue State, Taraba, and all that. These are where power is produced in bulk. But this power must be transported to the demand centers, to the load centers where power is demanded. I talk about, the Southwest, Ogun, where the industries are, Lagos, Benin area and all that, Ondo, Oyo. This is why transportation is involved. Now I have to transport this bulk power over a 330 kV lines, which is the high voltage transmission lines, to these load centers. That is more like the national grid. Then from there, you now take the regional grid, which is on 132 kV lines, for you to take it to the substations, where the discos will take their 33 kV line for distribution from it. That is what we call the national grid. You will see that we have experienced a number of collapse in the national grid. Why do we have collapse? But that's a problem with transmission. Grid disturbances is normal anywhere in the world. Even the advanced countries, they experience grid disturbances. But why is it a big deal in Nigeria? Because it leads to grid collapse. When other countries experience grid disturbance, it does not affect the end consumers. The person using the light does not even know there's any grid disturbance because they have mitigations against it. Because grid disturbance could be caused by so many things. It could be technical, it could be operational, it could be environmental. But how prompt do you respond to the disturbance so that it does not lead to a grid collapse? Is what differentiates us from the others. Number one, they have failover or backup grids. If there's a problem within the transmission line, it fails over to an alternative line. We don't have a failover backup grid here, which is the super grid. That's the solution to that. You understand? There's what we call a SCADA management system, which is the data remote monitoring of transmission lines. Once there is a problem, a difficulty with the frequency, in those parts of the world, the advanced nations, they have an automated way of controlling it, of fixing it. Today in Nigeria, we don't have SCADA fully implemented. We've been on it for the past 20 years. So we must ensure that we implement SCADA.
Why haven't we been able to implement it?
It's the problems that we have with our local expertise and our readiness to fund it. You understand? So that is the highway through which you transport data to the demand centers. Then when you get to the demand centers, you now need distribution infrastructures, which are more like the internal roads. For example, in the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, before now we used to have gridlocks. because the road was damaged, potholes, there were accidents and all. People spent hours, even a whole day. But the moment there is an alternative, the train station between Lagos and Ibadan, and they also fixed the main road. Have you heard of gridlock there? It's the same thing that happens with power lines. There must be a failover or a backup line to the national grid. Our grid is too fragile. And again, environmental reasons. Which part of the world will their citizens deliberately bring down transmission towers, bring down power lines? These are the things that could easily lead to grid collapse.
Are you implying that's what Nigerians have been doing?
Of course. Even 2 days ago, power lines and towers were brought down in Bauchi. A few days to New Year, last year, in Yobe. Even an official of the Nigerian Civil Defense Corps was even killed. People go and deliberately blow up our towers. They bring down our transmission lines. So what choice do you have as a minister? How do you control that? So you can see that sabotage is also part of this.
What about...
So let me just land on this so I don't really lose the line of thoughts. Now we're talking about the highway transmission, which is transportation, which I said, Federal Ministry of Power with the TCN, that's the Transmission Company of Nigeria, you can handle that. When you buy bulk foodstuff from Kano, from Benue, you're bringing them to Lagos, you use the highway. If the highway is bad, of course, you will lose part of those products. If there is a gridlock on the highway, there will be delays. But if there is an alternative road, you go through the alternative road. Can you now get to Lagos again with the bulk product and you start doing home delivery by yourself? No. Those home deliveries are for internal roads. You understand? So which is what the discos are doing. So those internal roads are like the distribution power lines, which is the 33 kV lines and the 11 kV lines. While the transmission power lines are the 330 and the 132. So I said that this should be unbundled and let each level of government
take up one,
monitor and track the operators within their locality. So when it gets to states, the state should take it as a matter of duty to monitor and track these discos. They will be up and doing. They can ask questions. For example, let me take my locality, Ibadan Disco, IBEDC. It covers about 6 states. Part of Ogun, the entire of Oyo, the entire of Osun, Kwara, part of Kogi, and part of Niger. If anything happens to power infrastructure in Lokoja or in Okene in Kogi State, Governor Ododo will be bothered. He's going to ask the MD of Ibadan Disco from Ibadan to come down to Kogi to come and attend to it. So I said that the disco should be structured along state lines so that the governors and the government at the state level will know who they are dealing with. So those are the issues. So transmission has its own peculiar issues too. The infrastructures are old. You understand? Those power lines have been there 40, 50 years without being changed. The towers have been there. The technology needed has not been fully implemented to remotely monitor what happens along the power lines. You understand? So I believe we have really documented what the solution is to this, but everything requires funding. Yes, it requires funding.
So there's a school of thought that will say, you are government, you should fund it, or do you want me to do the funding for you? That's a school of thought. But then you've talked about the role that the private sector can play. Now that we have a new Power Act that allows the private sector, allows the state governments to come into this. But the federal government is still holding on to the transmission situation. So even the private sector can't come into that. If you're saying you're having problems with transmission, funding the transmission infrastructure,
yes,
would you let the private sector come into that as well?
No, I'm not suggesting that. I think it is desirable for us to continue to be in custody of the transmission sector. But we're going to graduate into what we call the regional grid.
Okay.
We can even have state grid. I can also even have grid to be in custody of private sector for embedded markets. You understand? So why I mentioned the issue of funding is the transmission company also incurs costs. Wielding the power. Are they getting paid? No. They are being owed, just like the GenCos are being owed. And thanks to some of the development partners that we have that have actually been supporting us in funding some of these our transmission improvements, projects. We have the World Bank, we have the African Development Bank, we have the JICA, that's the Japan International Agency for the Economy, and we have AFD. A number of them have been coming to our aid. But for sustainability, because we need consistent and continuous funding for us to actually get to where we're going. If there is no such funding, there'll be very little that we can achieve when it comes to transmission. Because it costs so much money. To build a power substation now, it costs millions of dollars. To install 100 kilometers of 330 kV or 132 kV lines costs hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's not little money that is required for you to have stable electricity. It's a lot of investment over time. And we need to make the sector bankable so that it will be attractive to lenders.
You know, the
only way that it can become bankable is when the lenders can have a line of sight on if they invest this much, this is how the money is going to come back. If they don't have that, it will be tough to attract lending to this sector.
You know, I was going to ask you about the matter of the gas, which will come back to in terms of partnership between the Ministry of Power and the Ministry of Petroleum Gas.
Yes.
What's going on? Why can't the two ministries come together to see that there's enough gas supply, even if at a subsidized rate, to ensure that power gets to the people? But you just mentioned something here about a line of sight for the investor. I put in this money, I'll see it on the other end. It brings to mind certain monies that a lot of Nigerians have been asking questions about. $16 billion at a certain time was invested in the power sector. After that, some huge funds have still been invested. We don't know the exact amount that invested after that $16 billion. What's going to happen? Would the investors still come if they are not seeing justiciable action against those who might have misused this money in one way or the other? What's going on around that?
Yes, before I answer that, let me quickly mention the fact that I've had meetings with the Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Gas, on exploring ways of collaboration, of cooperation, of partnering to ensure we bring a permanent solution to the issue of shortage in gas supply. And we're making good progress. We've already set up a task force that has as membership staff from Federal Ministry of Power, from the Federal Ministry of Petroleum Resources, from the power generating companies, from the gas aggregation companies, from the gas supplier companies, and even from NERC, which is the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, to sit down and profile an enduring solution to this problem. Is I'm not going to become optimistic that that collaboration is going to yield good results. Now, on the issue of past spending in the sector, while I will not sit here and give you facts about what transpired, because I was not in the sector then, I can tell you that the 10 NIPP, the projects, the Nigerian Integrated Power Projects, under President Olusegun Obasanjo, they are there for us to see. And I'm aware they spent over $8 billion out of the so-called $16 billion that people bandied around. But we can see those plants today. We have 2 in Olosogbo. That's Papalanto in Ogun State. We have 2, Omotosho, 1, Omotosho 2, close to Ore. We have Iwobo in Benin. We have Egbema that's not been completed. We have in Calabar. We have about 10 of them. You understand? I know 7 of them was completed, and they are under the management of NDPHC today. They have capacities totally about 5,000. Yes. And it was good we made those investments then. But the issue is, have we really optimized the benefit of those investments? I would say no. Just a few days ago, I was at 2 of the plants. I inspected them physically myself. Olosogbo and Omotosho. When I got to Olosogbo, they had 6 turbines, 4 gas turbines and 2 steam turbines. It was a closed circuit system. But the gas turbines also generate steam for the 2 steam turbines. The capacity of each was 115 megawatts. For the 6 of them, 690 megawatts in Olosogbo. My brother, when I got there, it was only 1 that was operational, generating about 90 megawatts out of 690. That is about 15% capacity. You understand? I asked what are the issues. And out of the 6, about 4 were actually working. Maybe 1 or 2 are on, they were on routine maintenance. The issue was shortage of gas. They were not supplying gas because they were owing the gas companies. I got to Omotosho, which is an open circular system with 4 turbines of 125 megawatts each, making 500 megawatts. It was only 1 that was working at 110 megawatts out of 500. I left Omotosho not quite 30 minutes. I was called that the turbine has been shut down just because there was stoppage in gas supply. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Fine, we have invested so much in those turbines, in those gas plants, but have we optimized? So how I'm saying today in Nigeria, if we want to double our electricity supply, we can double it with the existing capacity that we have. Before we start talking of even establishing new generation companies.
So, Honorable Minister, as we wind down now, let's tell Nigerians and tell the world, what's the timeline and what's your goal in this ministry? And what's the timeline?
Thank you. Let me tell you, the power sector requires time. Even if you want to establish a generating company today, the minimum is 18 months to 24 months if it is a gas-powered plant. But manufacturing of the turbine itself will take 18 months. If it's a hydro power plant, it takes not less than 5 years. You have to build the dam. So if anybody tells you you have 24/7 uninterrupted light or power in the next 6 months, the next 1 year, it's a lie. It is not practically possible, even if you throw all the money in the world at it. But what I'm promising Nigerians is gradual but consistent improvements in electricity supply, so that what we have today will be better than yesterday. And what we are going to have tomorrow should be better than today. If you have this consistently over time, it becomes significant. And it is the passion, it is the commitment, and your readiness to make a change that will make it happen. And I'm happy that Mr. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, CFR, is committed and is passionate about transforming the sector. And myself, as the Minister of Power, representing him in this sector, I'm more than ready to make a change. We have gone beyond the diagnosis stage. We know what the problems are. And we have documented even solutions to achieve a transformation for this sector. Because if there is no electricity, there is virtually nothing that you can achieve. You cannot grow the economy. You cannot have industries. There won't be employment. You cannot substitute importation. You continue to be import dependent. You cannot create jobs. Even food sufficiency will be tough. Not talk of industrial development. So we are committed at Ministry of Power to ensure that we implement our documented strategies faithfully and consistently. And I'm optimistic that we are going to make a change. I can tell you, I'm the 47th Minister of Power in Nigeria. We've been roving around 3,000 to 4,000 megawatts. Past ministers were very intelligent individuals, very passionate about the country too, very cerebral, with very good political influence. Why have we not passed this? So there's something fundamental, which is what we are trying to address in this administration. And I believe we are going to succeed. Thank you very much.
If I ask you, what's that fundamental thing?
It is the political will. The political will. And, like I mentioned, liquidity.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, too.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Interesting conversations we've had today around the power sector. Many ideas, many suggestions, but above all, the will of government to see a change in the power sector is what the Minister of Power reiterated. Well, we have to go. We'll wait to hear from you. What do you think? Is the willpower there, or the political will, as he puts it? Is it there to see that change in the power sector? We're looking forward to your comments. They're right. Our addresses are right there on your screen. X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, and email. We wait to hear from you. Till we come your way again, just know that you can watch this episode again and other episodes of the program via our website, channelstv.com/podcast, or go to our YouTube channel, Channels Web on YouTube, to see all the episodes of Newsnight, past and present. Till we come your way again, it's bye-bye.